Sudan has been on an ongoing war for a year now. I've spent the first 3 months of that war stuck in the heart of where the war was, in the capital of Khartoum. This is my story. Before I begin, I'd like to say that this video talks about things that may make some people uncomfortable, so viewer discretion is advised. So my name is Hajid, and around this time last year, I had just finished my medical school and I was waiting to start my internship. I was working as a teaching assistant and I was also doing private English tuitions, and I was also working at a school. I also had the beginning of an idea to start an English club where I could teach people English. So things weren't necessarily booming, but they were going somewhere. There was a vision that I had to create something that's big, if I just had the time. I remember back then one of the sole reasons why I was working was because I wanted to buy myself the Sony XM5 headphones. My heart desired them like a hopeless romantic looking for his damsel in distress, and I never got the chance to meet my Queen Charming. The Rapunzel in my story had no hair. We're still talking about headphones here, of course. Then came the day of April 15th, 2023. I was supposed to go to work that day, but as we woke up to the sounds of heavy gunshots, it became clearer and clearer that nobody was leaving the house that day. Instinctively, we all went to Twitter to see what was going on, and we found that there were clashes between the two major powers near us. Prior to this happening, there was already pent-up commotion between the RSF, which is led by Hemeti, and the army, which was led by General Burhan. Negotiations between the two were ongoing, and that didn't work out, And we've seen this before, so our first instinct wasn't that this was going to become an all-out war. We just thought that this was going to be something that's going to pass by a month, maximum 2 months, and then it's all back to normal. I was wrong. We were wrong. Not this time. Different areas had it differently, and people quickly started to realize that this is much bigger than what we've seen before. People started to leave their houses and migrate to nearby states or to Egypt. This is probably where you heard about the large number of displaced Sudanese families. People's homes were getting broken into, their lives' work was being stolen by the RSF, their autonomy violated, and their lives taken. Houses would be hit and they would fall down, and fear was living in every corner of our country. The Sudanese people are known to fight back. But how can you fight back when the aggressor is known to have a gun and is not afraid to shoot at you? You can't. I remember the sounds. The windows in our house would shake when a missile falls nearby. And although we got used to the sounds of guns, the sounds of missiles was something we did not get used to. The fear of a missile striking never faded. At that time, I was living with my family, and we were living next to a leader of a militia who had his people protect him. We were included in that. So we were fortunate in that aspect. And it's probably the reason why we were able to stay so long. But that wasn't enough, because we still have to eat, and to do that we have to go to the remaining open shops, and that was risky. All the cars around us were smudged with mud. RSF soldiers all around. These were civilian cars stolen by the RSF. Fortunately, we had power and water, and that was a big thing because there was a lot of people who had no water for over a week. I remember jokingly we were complaining once about not having power for 2 days, and someone was like, I haven't had power for 3 weeks. Still, we'd think that the war will end soon. It didn't. Shops would run out of ingredients and clothes. Our cars would run out of fuel, and then we'd mostly walk to get what we want. Rice, juice, beans, vegetables, bread. Always bread. I rarely look back at that time, but damn, it was a struggle. My cousins and I were living together at that point, and this was an opportunity that helped us get closer to each other, and really, honestly, that's what got me through this emotionally. I'm so appreciative of the time that I had with them and the things that we did, and I miss them. We were playing a lot of cards, watching movies, play more cards, get food for the house, sleep, and repeat. At some point, we decided to create skits about the types of people during the war, and that was a big success. A lot of people loved it, and it gave us something to work on during that time. And you know, we kind of became famous. So we filmed types of people during the war, part 1, part 2, part 3, types of people when playing cards, types of people in university, types of people in funerals, so on and so forth. You might be thinking, why didn't you just leave? Why were you putting yourself in this situation? That you were susceptible to danger. You could have died, and you are completely correct. However, my family were scared about leaving the house behind and it being stolen. Not to mention that some of them didn't really compute how bad the situation was, because they would spend most of their times indoors since we were the ones who were going outside to get everything that we need. They didn't have to see what was going on, and they'd get their news from the TV, and you know, we all know how the TV works. We tried and tried and tried to demand leaving, but it wasn't easy and it didn't end up happening. So 1 month becomes 2, and 2 months becomes 3, and we were still there. By that time, Khartoum was a ghost town. I filmed some videos showing my day, and I did not realize the amount of people who were seeing Khartoum through my lens. It was actually astonishing. But things started to go downhill. For starters, we started to have issues with power and water. At one point, our power was cut for 86 hours consecutively. But man, not having water is not fun. This place was starting to really become uninhabitable. And then came the dreaded night. The leader of the militia who was protecting us left 2 nights ago, and with that we also left his protection. I was the only one awake, laying in the dark on my phone, and then I started to hear footsteps. Someone climbing the wall of our house, and I started to see the light of a flash. I heard them tussle and walk. Everyone around me was asleep. I was the only one who was awake. I didn't know what to do. I called my cousin, and fortunately he picked up, and I was just whispering to him like, "They're here. Hassan, they're here." He thought I was joking at the start. I wish I was. I could hear them trying to steal our cars, the metals clanking, the footsteps. Then we were shocked by the sound of shattering glass. It was a statement telling us that we are here and you probably should leave. My family woke up in a frenzy, scared. We all ran upstairs where we all hid and tried to anxiously contact people who can come to our aid. That night was a night that I kind of realized that nobody was there to help us. Nobody was coming to save us. We're in this on our own. It was only God who was going to help us. So we stayed up as they tussled with the cars. We preemptively removed the car batteries and the tires so that in case something happens like this, it isn't easy to steal the cars. And this came in handy because after 2 hours of trying to remove the cars, they weren't able to, so they eventually just gave up. A family member decided to go down and confront them against our judgment, and he found that there was no one there anymore. They left. We were so lucky. Once again, nothing was taken. The Dumbos couldn't remove the car, but that didn't mean that we were in the clear. They were definitely coming back the next night with whatever they needed to be able to actually take this car. And this meant that this time it is not negotiable. We are not staying. We were leaving today. So we did. We packed our things and left the house that same afternoon, leaving our house behind and all the memories that we've built in it in this house and in this city that we call home. We had one of the soldiers in front of us as a negotiator so that we are able to take our cars through the investigative checkpoints without them being stolen. And there was not a single person from the army. Every single checkpoint was a checkpoint from the RSF. It was just the RSF. And in every single checkpoint there would be a fight telling us to go back. And I'm like, bro, you really think that we can go back? We don't got nowhere to go back to. We kept going and eventually we were in the clear. And it was beautiful. The days of the war were behind us, and when we were entering there were people saying hi to us, congratulating us, and just waving to us that we've made it. We went to the nearby state of Al Jazeera, specifically in Al Hasahisa, and we got our first night of worryless sleep. We stayed with a family house. It was nice. They had grapefruit trees. We played PlayStation, but the power cut a lot, and the mosquitoes. I hate nothing more in my life than damn mosquitoes. By that time, my family was working on a process to get us out of Sudan and into Saudi, so we had to wait until everything was in the clear for us to move. We spent 2 weeks in Al Hasahisa going through the motions until our process was accepted and finalized, and then it was time to leave. Unfortunately, my cousins weren't able to go with us. We were going to Saudi Arabia by land through Ethiopia. This was a difficult journey, and it began by us being separated from my cousins who we've spent the whole period of the war with. I can't express the sadness. I miss them a lot. We started moving and each journey would last about 6 hours, and I was showcasing the journey and filming videos about it, and the videos were going viral. Every stop that we had, people would start to recognize me. It felt kind of cool, not gonna lie. So we went from the state of Al Jazeera to Al Qadarif, where we spent a day with a generous family friend, and I looked through a beautiful city that reminded me of Khartoum. 6 hours, then we headed to Matamma, which was the border between Ethiopia and Sudan. And through that journey, we started to see scenes of nature that were beautiful. We underwent the visa process and it was time consuming and tiring. I spent the whole day waiting under the sun, and at the end we finished, but we weren't able to leave because it was too late for the buses to go. We had to spend the night at the border. We stayed at a small motel-like room, which wasn't very fun, especially for families. Sounds at night, drinking, it was just not a vibe. Then in the morning we were up and running to go to Gondar, which was a city in Ethiopia, after which we were going to go to Addis Ababa by plane. Here we really saw scenes of nature and the mountains and the greenery. 6 hours. Bear in mind that my grandfather was with us throughout all of this, so this was not something that was safe for someone who's of old age. We got to Gondar, and luckily I had booked a flight previously for that same day. You'll understand why I said luckily. We got to the airport and I changed out of my struggle clothes to change into something that's more elegant. We went to the food area, got some food and drinks, and then headed to the plane. This was the last plane to leave Gondar for around a week. Ethiopia also had some civil issues, which has caused the airport to shut down and shut off all the Sudanese people in the city. Once again, we were incredibly lucky to decide to book the flight early on. The flight lasted an hour and a half, after which we arrived to Addis Ababa. Finally, a taste of freedom. The journey wasn't over, but the hard part was behind us. Now we can complain about boredom instead of complaining about tiredness. We spent another 2 fun weeks in Addis Ababa waiting for our visa process. And if you didn't get it by now, let me remind you one last time. We happened to be one of the last people who got their visas accepted easily. Alhamdulillah. We were once again incredibly lucky because it became a hassle for people after us to go through their visa process. We visited the mall there, I watched a movie for the first time in an actual cinema, hung out with people, walked around the city and looked at the beautiful scenery and the mountains, got some good haircuts, and attempted to visit a nice park that had zip lines and things like that, but we eventually failed because it was literally raining ice at that point. So we weren't able to get out of the car and we had to just kind of backtrack, go back home. All in all, it was a nice trip in Addis Ababa, and as I was leaving, I went to visit my barber, the one who worked really hard on my hair. He literally worked a complete hour just on my head. You don't come across people like that often, so God bless him. I got a haircut and it was time for us to go. Our final destination was the city of Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, but we had to stop at the Jeddah airport first. And let me tell you the cultural shock that we had when we got there. It was real. Getting down and being transported from one area to the other by what looked like a bullet train was astonishing to us. What? A train inside the airport? Unfortunately, living in Sudan really narrows your outlook on the world and makes you live more so based on survival. And this is where the story comes in full circle. I was in contact with my mom because I asked her to buy me the XM5s and I will pay her back in installments. I insisted on the headphones being there when I arrived. I have waited enough time suffering. Honestly, I deserve this. The first 2 months of the war, I was genuinely heartbroken about not being able to buy those headphones. Our transit was over and we were arriving to Riyadh. Getting there was interesting. Here I am in a place where I grew up, back again. And we were just glad for this to finally be over. To be this much closer to laying in bed and realizing that that's it. I don't have to think about where I'm going next or wait for it. I've arrived. And we did. And so did my headphones. We can all now sigh in relief because we've made it and it's over. The next day we learned that our house in Sudan that we left a month ago has become a base for the RSF. Months later, and the RSF started to invade neighboring states that used to be safe, and the big car that we left with was eventually taken. My cousins were in Madani at that point, the city where the RSF decided to invade. They had to move from state to state to state to state to go on a journey to find safety. This is my story. Every single Sudanese person has been affected by this war. So many people have lost their life savings, their cars, their homes, their gold, their families. We're all further away from each other. People have passed away. Everything stolen and destroyed because of the RSF. And for many of us, the story of war is still not over. There are still people in Sudan, still people in the capital of Khartoum. Many people remain in the crevices of lost hope. It's been a full year now of Sudan in pain, in despair, finding food, finding shelter, of the fear of war and missing home, of not having money, and it's not going to get better anytime soon. If you'd like to help, I provided links below to people and organizations that are currently helping the people in Sudan, whether it's medical aid or emergency funds or food. Please check those links below and lend a hand if you can. It makes a big difference. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.